Hi, thanks for stopping by. Today I want to talk about a case that happened in Canada in the mid 1990s. It's a wild ride. The media goes crazy on this one. The courts hide some information here and there, and the defense attorney, he hides information. I don't know. It's a crazy one. So, if you haven't guessed already, we are going to be talking about the case of Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo. So, anybody who's familiar with this one, you know you're in for a bumpy ride. So, let's get into it.
But to judge what is necessary to be told, it is necessary to see and hear all that is to be seen and heard.
So, we are going to start with Karla Homolka. She was born in 1970 in Canada to a pretty normal family. She had two younger sisters, and it was a perfectly normal childhood from all accounts. Carla started getting into detective like stories, Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, right around the age of 12. And she kind of developed a little bit of an obsession with crime. And I mean, we all are here watching true crime stories, right? We're talking about it. But it kind of warped Carla's mind quite a bit, I would say. She ended up really enjoying scaring people, enjoying scaring her friends, and I don't know how fun that was for everybody else. Didn't sound like too fun of a time, but Carla ended up moving on pretty quickly to new interests. She found that she really enjoyed hanging out with the boys, and she was considered conventionally attractive, so the boys just loved her and she wasn't scared. Personally, I think that Carla's eyes just, there's something bad in there. Even pictures of her when she was really young, her eyes just have, it just looks like there's some kind of evil in there. And I don't know. Listen, she just creeps me out. Just to be straight up, no, her eyes creep me out. Anyway, so Carla actually started getting into sex and drugs, and it was something that, she was experimenting with, seeing how the life was. Carla had a love for animals that she really carried from her childhood all the way up until she became an adult. It seems to be a lifelong love of hers. And I mean, at that young age, she's like 16, 17 years old. She actually gets a job with a veterinarian. She enjoys it. She gets to be around the animals. And really, all the jobs that she had around this time really involved just being around animals and, you know, taking care of them from what it seems. I did see some questions online about it, something about, I don't know, a hamster getting thrown out of a window, but I don't know. It seems like she really appreciated animals, at least her dogs, more than some people. Now, in 1987, Carla was attending a pet convention, and the hotel that she was at for it just so happened to have a restaurant downstairs. And by chance, she got a little bit hungry in the evening and she went down to the restaurant, and this man walked in. And when she locked eyes with him, man, let me tell you, the reports are that love was in the air and it was just an instant connection. This man was Paul Bernardo. They clicked so well that she brought him up to her room that night. And I think their evil recognized each other. And it seems like they found themselves to be quite compatible. Paul's childhood was different from Carla's, to say the least. He grew up in a household where the mother and father absolutely hated each other. Now, it's really no wonder why they hated each other. She didn't want to marry him. Paul's mom was had a different man in mind that she wanted to marry, but her father insisted that she marry Kenneth Bernardo because he had a good job, he had education, and in the father's opinion, Kenneth Bernardo was better. So he forced his daughter to marry her. Such was the ways back then in a lot of traditional families, some places, I suppose, now, but She fell victim to the way that that was set up. Now, Paul was the third born of the children, okay? After the first two, though, his mother just she got heartsick and she wasn't in love. So she ended up going out and going back to the man that she had wanted to marry. It didn't help that Kenneth was actually pretty abusive. I'm pretty sure that that also contributed to it, but you know, this affair that she had ended up leading to Paul being born. And his father was not happy. And I mean, not his biological father, his mom's husband, because, Kenneth Bernardo is on the birth certificate. He was put on the birth certificate at the time of Paul's birth. This comes into play when Paul turned 16, okay? Because at 16 years old, things were kind of tough for him. I mean, he had watched for years as his dad beat his mom, and his dad was sick in the head. His dad would molest their daughter right in front of the whole family, too, when there was movie night, his minor child. And because he was abusive, everybody was scared to stop him. For Paul, it ended up really just becoming a normal way of life. And, seeing all the fights between them, I think, when you're young like that and you're around dysfunction, you want to break free of it. You want to find somebody that you can love. You want to find some kind of comfort. And Paul did. He ended up finding a girlfriend around that time and he fell in love. I mean, she comes out after the trial and she is really, or I guess after he was arrested, she comes out and I mean, she's just confused because she's talking about how that wasn't the same guy that she had dated all the way back when. But, there are a few things that happened to Paul around that time that really just seemed to break something in his brain. So that girl actually ended up breaking up with him and dating his friend that lived across the street. And that's gotta hurt because he was friends with that other kid, the one that stole his girlfriend. Yeah, Paul was friends with him. So it had to have been just an awful betrayal. And then his mom, I'm not sure exactly how far after that, but it wasn't that far after that breakup that Paul's mom came in and let him know that Kenneth was not actually his biological father. And this just broke whatever last trust Paul had with his mother at the time. So Paul starts running around, saying some really awful things to her, calling her a whore. Just, he's heartbroken. The trust is never there again. With the foundation that Paul had from watching his parents growing up and the heartbreak and betrayal that he felt between his first girlfriend and his mother, like all around the same time, these violent, very misogynistic fantasies started blooming up for him. And Paul ended up acting on it. He actually started as a rapist. The Scarborough rapist is what he had been referred to as because nobody knew it was him. For years, they had no clue who the Scarborough rapist was. And I mean, it was Paul. These were violent attacks, okay? So, I mean, he would jump behind women, never let them see his face, and violently rape them wherever they were. There were obviously survivors at this time. He actually doesn't murder anybody until his first time with Karla. And uh, for me, I don't even think he actually wanted to. Uh, but yeah, I mean, at this time, he's the Scarborough rapist. And I mean, he doesn't need to go around raping people. He's considered a very good looking man. He is very charismatic. I mean, there's even accounts of him later on where people are talking about how charismatic and intelligent he is. And, if you didn't know what he actually did, you would never guess. And I mean, he just had that darkness inside of him, and that was how he took it out. Now, as Paul is committing a series of rapes, and this, I mean, this started before he met Karla. So he wasn't innocent before he met Karla. He just wasn't a murderer. Now, the police were trying to figure out who it was and having a difficult time, of course. DNA and all the forensic stuff, all of that was very different. And this was all happening back in 1986, 1987. So it's just something that they don't have the ability yet, but they are still collecting the evidence because they know that there are better things coming on the horizon. So, that fateful night in 1987 when Karla and Paul met, like I said, connection was instant. They went up to her room and they were intimate the very first night. And it was, I mean, they were stuck at that point, both of them. They both, I think, got something out of each other. You know, for Karla, she loved being submissive to him, but she also had that evil streak in her too, where, I mean, she was fascinated with a lot of the things that he ended up going on to do and a lot of the kinks that he had, you know, because there are videos that come out later on, and I mean, they're not viewable to anyone. They're actually destroyed by now, but anybody who's actually watched them, they'll tell you how fucked up they are. I mean, there's like newscasts of people talking about it, and it's just awful. It's just awful. And I mean, they film these terrible things, and I just, you know, but really, long story short, what everybody got out of watching these videos, the universal accounting, is that Karla enjoyed it. The reports vary on when Paul told Karla that he was the Scarborough rapist. I don't believe what Karla says. And during the trial, she says that she didn't know until the night that they got married. Bullshit. Okay, and here's why. They got engaged Christmas of 1989, Christmas Eve of 1989. Paul actually was living with Karla, living with her family, and they'd been together for quite some time. Paul gets this obsession with Karla's little sister. And I mean, at this point, Karla knows because he's telling Karla how shitty it is of her that she wasn't a virgin when he got with her and how he is owed that. But then he also goes into how obsessed he is with her little sister, who was 12 when he met her, by the way. He was 23 and she was 12. I don't think anybody puts a big enough emphasis on the fucking pedos that these two people are, but all of these victims we are talking about today, they are all under the age of 16. So please keep that in mind. Like, when I'm going through this, don't worry, I'll remind you, but it's just, it makes it that much more sick and disgusting. So, the year that first year that Karla and Paul are engaged, you know, going from Christmas of 1989 through the year 1990, Paul keeps talking about wanting to have sex with Tammy. He wants to deflower Karla's little sister. Okay. And Karla's 20 at this time. Paul is 26. Karla's little sister, Tammy, is 15. Okay. 15. And the real shitty thing, actually, is later on when we get a little bit further into it, I feel like she is the one that always gets passed over the most. And it's so hard to hear. Uh, so we'll get there though. Now, you would think that most people, if they hear something like that from their 26-year-old boyfriend or girlfriend or whoever, they would be done. I mean, literally, like, fuck that. That's not somebody you want in your life. If you are with somebody and they are like trying to convince you to let them have sex with your underage sibling, just nope the fuck out of there, okay? Disgusting. probably report them too. I think that'd be a good thing. Anyway, that's not how Karla took it. Karla actually, in July, tries to help Paul rape her little sister for the first time. She crushes up some Valium, throws it in some spaghetti, and feeds it to Tammy. Okay? Tammy, Karla's little sister, she eats the spaghetti, she gets sleepy, and Karla and Paul work to try and get Paul to rape Tammy. And he gets to do it for about a minute before she starts waking up. So now they're realizing this isn't going to work. We need to do something else. You know, most people wouldn't have even gotten to that point, but not Karla and not Paul. Especially not Karla, though. Like, seriously, if she is watching this, fuck you, Karla. That's fucked up. Okay? How do you live with yourself? So, we are going to go to the Christmas party they had for 1990, December 23rd of 1990 to be exact. Karla, Paul, her family, they're all having a party, okay? Everybody's there, they're drinking. Karla's parents didn't mind if Tammy had a few drinks, you know, while they were at home. They figured it was a safe thing and whatever. But they also didn't know that they had some disgusting, evil, evil people in their house, okay? Because what they do this night cannot be described as anything but. Karla and Paul, they start drugging Tammy's drink. So she's getting sleeping pills put in her drink. These were sleeping pills that were prescribed to Karla. There's some sleeping pills in her drink. And then everybody goes to bed. So the other sister, the middle sister, Karla's parents, they all go to bed, and the only people left up are Karla, Paul, and Tammy. And Karla and Paul, they're watching, they're waiting, and when they see Tammy actually go out, they spring into action. Okay, so Karla pulls out Halidol. Okay, just have to pause here real quick. Words are hard, especially when we're talking about drugs. And the specific drugs that I refer to in this section that Karla had used was halcyon and halothane. These were the drugs that she used consistently on her sister and their other victims. Okay, back to the story. Halidol is an anesthetic that they use when they're doing, you know, things that they want the animals to be sleepy for. So she gives this to her sister, and Karla tries to play it off later on, like she didn't have it that close to her sister. But the video, the way that the court described the video, because, you know, nobody public has seen it, Karla actually has the halothane soaked rag and she's holding it on Tammy's face. And I mean, they're out there on the internet, pictures of Tammy post-mortem, and she has a big burn on her face. And that burn is actually probably from the halothane that Karla had that she was holding on the cloth on Tammy's face. Because, I mean, it shouldn't have been there. And between doing that and having the alcohol, it was a really bad mix. Okay. And then what are Paul and Karla doing after they get her drugged out? They're raping her, and they're doing it on the camera, the video camcorder. This was Paul's Christmas gift, and I mean, he had used it earlier filming the family and everything, but then he films this horrific rape of Tammy, and it's not just him that is raping Tammy. Karla is on video doing it herself to her little sister. It's fucking disgusting. Okay? All the disgusting points of it is just, and it's heartbreaking, you know, because Tammy deserved better. Tammy's big sister was a piece of fucking shit. Okay? That should never have happened. And it's sad to me because I feel like Tammy doesn't get enough attention as a victim. Sometimes, I mean, I know that people mention her, but even if you look like at the court, when all of that's going on, Karla's parents are with her. They're not. I know it must be a difficult position to be in, but I don't think I could forgive my daughter for doing something like that. I don't think I could forgive a child for doing that to another one of my children. No, that's just fucking sick. But they did, and poor Tammy just gets left by the wayside. Meanwhile, there's that video evidence of them. And when Paul gets on her for the second time, yeah, it was more than once. When Paul gets on her for the second time, Tammy actually ends up vomiting and choking on her vomit. Karla and Paul get real worried. They hurry up, they throw some clothes on her, they throw her on the bed in the room, and then they call the ambulance. And the ambulance comes, but there's nothing that they can do, and Tammy passes away. So, when Tammy's autopsy came back, they ended up ruling it an accidental death, but not homicide. So they ended up getting away with it. Paul seemed way more upset, though. He seemed way more upset at the death of Tammy than Karla. Karla just kind of went up into cleaning mode and kind of, I don't know, just didn't seem to care. I mean, even in letters that she was sending her friends in the 6 months, they get married 6 months after Tammy gets murdered by them, raped and murdered brutally by them. So 6 months after that, they get married. But the whole time in between that, Karla is writing letters to her friends and complaining about her parents because they just won't get over Tammy dying and they want to spend all this money on her funeral, but they're cutting money out of the wedding and just real selfish behavior. That ain't it. Okay? That to me just speaks volumes to the kind of person that Karla is. I mean, Paul fucking sucks too. Like, he can get his fucking shit knocked out too. But Karla, just the way that she is especially heartless about her little sister is disgusting. Now, in the time between Christmas and when Paul and Karla get married, Paul still continues on with his nasty shit. He continues on going around raping girls, and Karla knows. She tries to play dumb at some point, but she knows because about 2 weeks before they get married, they're getting ready for the wedding. They had moved into a house together at this time so that they could accommodate both of their sick sexual kinks. Uh, and I mean, 2 weeks, 2 weeks before their wedding, they have the champagne flutes and, they have everything in line. They're just anticipating it. And what does Paul do? He is driving around late at night looking for another rape victim. He comes across Leslie Mahaffey. Okay, she's 14 years old. She gets locked out of her house and she's too proud to call her mom. She was going through a tough time. She had just had a friend die and was at like a celebration of life or like a funeral for her friend. And, it was a tough time. She gave a little bit of trust to Paul. He got her to come to his car to smoke a cigarette with him. And that was when he actually grabbed her into the car, kidnapped her, and took him back to the house that he and Karla shared. When he brings Leslie into the house, Karla is upstairs. I think she was sleeping at the time. And, whatever Paul is doing, he's real excited because he's getting ready to film another rape of his. And he's disgusting. He has a record of everything. He's like filming everything at the time. And, it's a good thing he did because we have proof of what exactly happened. Without those, it would just be Karla's word. And I think everybody would look at her a lot differently than, she deserves. Because let me tell you, the side eyes that lady catches, ugh, she should be ashamed of herself. And she's still going out. Anyway, let's move on. Now, 2 weeks before their wedding, we're talking June 14th. Father's Day weekend. June 14th, I think, was a Saturday, June 14th of 1991. No, Friday. I think it was a Friday because Karla and Paul end up keeping Leslie and torturing her, raping her for about 24 hours. Now, I personally think that Leslie made a huge mistake, not by her choice, but by Paul, because what Paul does is he goes and he grabs those special champagne flutes that they had. They had come from France, and Karla was really excited. It was one of their things that they were doing for their wedding. It was supposed to be the glasses that they drank from after they got married in their wedding with 150 guests and a horse-drawn carriage, big princess dress for her. Yeah. Now, when Karla had come downstairs, she saw those two champagne flutes right there on the table, and her jealousy just fucking raged at that point. She took her dog out for a walk and she came back, and all of the things that they did to Tammy, they ended up doing to Leslie. How Leslie died is not something that we really know. It really just depends on who you talk to, because Karla insists that Paul strangled her with an electrical cord, but Paul insists that Karla's the one that killed Leslie, which, I mean, if Karla was that jealous, I could see that. Paul, with his fucking sick shit, I could see him doing it too. Basically, what I'm saying is both of them, they both are equally responsible for that. All right. And then what do? Their family is getting ready to visit. Karla's mom and dad and sister, yeah, they're all coming to visit for Father's Day. So Leslie had been taken on Friday. On Saturday is when she ended up getting killed. And then Sunday is when Karla's family comes over. So what do? They hide Leslie downstairs in the basement, and they have a close call, but Karla ends up saving her mom from going downstairs. But, it regardless, they have a dead 14-year-old girl down there while they're celebrating Father's Day. The way that they dispose of her is disgusting too. They end up dismembering Leslie and encasing the different pieces of her body in cement. And then what they do is they go and they dump these blocks of cement out in this lake. But the thing is, they are not natives to this area. They had lived somewhere else. And the spot that they chose in that lake ended up going down so low that 2 weeks later, on their wedding day, believe it or not, they're getting married a couple of miles away from that lake. And Leslie is found the same exact day that they're getting married. Wild shit. Okay, it's like the universe was trying to call it out. So, I mean, how awful. The police grab all the different pieces of concrete and they're trying to piece it together and trying to figure it out, and it's just an awful time. They're not sure really where to go from here, and what do? You can't really do anything but continue trying. They pulled in experts, they came up with an idea of who did it, but it never included a woman. Less than a year after they get married, less than a year after Leslie, Paul and Karla had, in the almost year that passed, they had other people that they were trying to bring in to get Paul a sex slave, somebody to go along with Karla, and somebody that Karla could kind of dominate over while being submissive to Paul. Like, it was disgusting. But there's a track record. They do another rape together that they also videotape in their home, and you know, at some point they decide, well, they say that Paul decides, but I wonder how much Karla decided it too. But there's a decision made that Paul needs to have another minor child. On April 16th of 1992 is when Paul and Karla decide that that's the day, and they end up kidnapping Kristen French. She was a 15-year-old girl that had just gotten out of school, and she had been abducted in a church parking lot. The way that they got her to the car was Karla played the inviting woman, and Paul ended up using a knife to help make her stay. So Karla has her in the car. She's holding her down by her hair, and Paul is in the front seat with Kristen. He's holding a knife to her, and they go back to the home, and that's where the evil unfolds again. they do the same thing with Kristen as they did with the other two victims of theirs, Leslie and Tammy. But this time, Kristen stays around for a little bit longer. She's not blindfolded. She's not having to, be as out of it as Tammy was, and as they weren't trying to keep it as secretive to her as they were with Leslie. Kristen, I mean, she ended up, I don't know, Karla was like painting nails with her and stuff, trying to have girl time while Paul ran off to go and get them food. What I want to know is, Karla, if you're such a nice person, if you're such an innocent little dove, I mean, why didn't you just leave? I mean, the explanation that's given through the court is that she was scared Paul would come home and find them trying to escape, but I'm gonna call bullshit again. Karla, to me, just based on everything that's out there, she liked it. After a few days of torture for Kristen, they end up killing her and cutting her hair off and throwing her on the side of the road, only a few miles away from Leslie. The disposal method was different for each of them. So at first, it wasn't really connected, but it ended up being so. It takes about 2 weeks for Kristen to be found. And in the meantime, there was a little bit of movement on the Scarborough rapist case. Remember that? Now, Paul had been going around, and I mean, he was the Scarborough rapist, and there had been a sketch that had come out. And right before Tammy had been murdered, Paul had actually been called in, and he voluntarily gave them a sample of his DNA, saliva. You know, again, DNA wasn't like we know it nowadays, but back then, I think he was thinking more, oh, if I just give this to them, they'll leave me alone and they will think I had nothing to do with it. And 2 years later, basically, it ends up coming back to save, hopefully, countless other possible victims. Fortunately, it was not quick enough to save all of the various victims that Paul had, the ones that were left alive and the ones that were not. I bet you're wondering how exactly Paul was caught for the murders. Well, him and Karla, they had been trying again after Kristen's murder to get him to be able to have a living slave, because he kept pushing to Karla that he wanted a girl that would stay around. And, they weren't really having any luck with that. What they end up doing then is, they pull another girl in, and when they finally get to the point where she might actually submit to Paul, she just doesn't seem that interested. She feels like she's betraying Karla, and, she runs off again. So Paul, in all his misogyny and anger, he gets pissed at Karla, and he ends up beating the shit out of her. Karla gets ripped away from Paul by her parents because, I mean, there's no way that she can hide those black eyes. And her parents decide, nope, we're taking you away. They're doing the intervention. Karla didn't want to leave. She was very adamant about staying, but her parents insisted, and she got away from him. And in the month between when she left Paul and when Paul gets arrested and they start having to go further into everything, Karla's having a grand old time. She's out there partying. She's got a boyfriend. Just there's nothing there. She is a sociopath, in my very unprofessional opinion, because I can't think of any other type of personality that can just be like that. Paul is arrested on February 17th of 1993, and then after that, the police have the warrant and they start searching the house, and they tear this house apart. I mean, Paul and Karla had been renting this house, and it had been freshly all remodeled and redone, and the couple that owned the house, they were pretty upset at the police, to say the least. But their supposed extensive 71-day search, they ended up missing a lot of evidence. So the tapes, right? I bet you're wondering, like, oh, everybody gets to see the tapes. I've been talking about the tapes. Unfortunately, yeah, the tapes are found, but they are not found by the police. Karla does mention tapes, but what the police find is a videotape that has like 2 minutes of Paul and Karla raping a girl that's referred to as Jane Doe in the trial. Yes, this is one that survived. So when they found that video, they start having questions for Karla, but the real bad stuff, they didn't find those videos. Paul's original attorney found those videos. And when he found those videos, he was sitting on them thinking that they were going to be, his smoking gun. That's going to be how he discredits Karla. Uh, Unfortunately, yeah, that didn't happen that way. Because he held on to those tapes, there had been desperation from the Canadian authorities. The Crown is what they call it, the prosecuting body there. There was desperation on their part to put Paul behind bars. There was DNA that linked him with that Scarborough rapist that he had given up. And, now that they know about the murders, they were hearing all this stuff from Karla. They had to do something. They had to get this guy off the streets. Of course they do. They have to keep everyone safe. Nobody wants to have to worry about their daughters like that, because at that point, all the teenage girls were at risk. These were pedophiles out there kidnapping and murdering people, okay? The plea agreement that Karla ended up coming to terms with the prosecutors only ended up giving her 12 years. That's it. 12 years, okay? And they made this deal 16 or 17 months before the defense actually ended up giving up those videotapes, so they didn't know the full extent. But they had a clause in the plea deal where Karla, if she lied, she had to be completely truthful. And if she lied, she's reneging on their deal and then they can prosecute her. Well, guess who has a spot of lucky amnesia? They try to play it off as it's like PTSD amnesia, but come on. From what I understand, there was pure joy in her eyes. I mean, there were even videos where after they had murdered Tammy, she dressed up in Tammy's clothes and was like sex playing with Paul like she was Tammy. Fucking disgusting. You can find transcripts of it out there. It's so gross. I suggest that you don't, but like if you really must, it's out there and it's fucking awful. Just take my word for it. So Karla gets her 12 years. She testifies against Paul. The whole thing is a circus. The Canadian government, the Crown, they didn't let any members of the public know about the deal with Karla until the court with Paul. And I mean, we're talking a year and a half after she uh pleads guilty. Okay. And when the public found out, they were outraged. If you look at news coverage from that time, you'll see the way that people are like, "Wait a minute. What?" Nobody was happy with that decision. Nobody. But it was weird because it seemed like the Crown just, that was it. They were done. They weren't considering it. Nothing. They accepted her bullshit excuse that she had, I don't know, whatever, PTSD, dissociative, whatever. An insult to the people who actually deal with that, mind you. So, Paul, of course, he ends up getting found guilty and he gets sentenced to life with 25 years before he's eligible for parole. I don't think they're ever letting him out. Although, here's an update on him. He actually was in high security, maximum security until not too long ago, a few months ago. He got moved to medium security. So I think he finds it as a win. I know that a lot of people are really upset about it, but keep that asshole locked up. Like he doesn't need to be out. Okay, let's do that. Let's do that for society. Okay, because we don't want him. Okay, we don't want him out. Karla, on the other hand, had a nice cushy stay at her little prison. I mean, she's like dressing up, there's makeup, she gets to go like do fun things. It just seems more like a hangout rather than like any kind of punishment for her. I mean, she's got relationships while she's in there. One of the things that she did at court was she like insisted No, of course I didn't enjoy anything that I did on those tapes. Insisted that she was disgusted by the idea of having sex with a woman. Uh, and she ended up actually having a girlfriend while she's locked up. Imagine that. Real interesting stuff. Um, so anyway, after 12 years, Karla actually gets let out. I think 2005 she was let out. Yeah. Yeah, that fucking monster is literally walking this earth. Like, not behind jail. Like, no, there's no bars. She's out there, okay? And she got married and she had 3 kids. She was volunteering at her kids' school. How is that allowed? How is that okay? She is a danger. And from what I understand, her children are boys. And I think the last update I had, the boys were like in elementary school. So if they're not teenagers by now, they are getting close. And I would be concerned. I would be concerned for any one of her boys' girlfriends, because I don't think any teenage girl is safe around her. I don't think anybody out there is safe around her. So, uh, it's that's the biggest suck ass thing that I have heard out of the Canadian justice system. It doesn't feel like justice. Their families have to know. I mean, their families are still around. They have to live with knowing that Karla is out, except for Karla's family, because during the trials, Karla's family was supportive. They were there for her, all of them. Mom, dad, sister. Maybe they're better people than me, but I don't think I could. I don't think I could. Nope. Especially because the first victim was Tammy. And Tammy, that's what I mean by Tammy just like gets overlooked. Everybody pays attention to Leslie and Kristen, and there are even some people who really, I don't know, they like paint Karla in this victim light, and no. But Tammy seems to be the one that is going to be forgotten if anyone does. So it was a horrible time. I'm glad that they didn't have any more victims. They could have done a lot more damage. The time frame that they were active was relatively small compared to some of the awful people we hear about. So I'm glad they got caught. Paul is where he needs to be, but Karla unfortunately is out there. So I guess keep your eyes open and watch your kids, especially your girls, because you know it's one of those things where when you break a trust like that, I don't know that you can ever be trusted again. So yeah. Well, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for hanging out with me and going through this story. Infuriating at times. But uh at least Paul is behind bars. So I can only hope for the same for Karla sometime soon. Maybe she'll go back. Anyway, wishful thinking. You all have a great day. Thanks for coming by again, and I will see you in the next one.